The important thing is AJ's getting the help he needs. Whatever it is, I'm sure it's a chemical imbalance.
It's me. It's all these toxins they're exposed to. It fucks with their brains. Between the mercury and fish alone, it's a wonder there ain't more kids jumping off bridges.
Or could it be the asbestos in the lakes? Who knows? Welcome, my friends, to Cut to Black, a Sopranos sit-down. My name is Jim Scampoli, and I've seen every single episode of The Sopranos.
My name is Jakob Burrows, and I've seen 84 episodes of The Sopranos. Damn, these two, Jim? These two in a row, though? Aw, damn. That's all I've got to say at the start of this one. The Second Coming. Season 6, Episode 19, of course. Who put this one together?
This episode was written by Terrence Winter and directed by Tim Van Patten. It originally aired May 20th, 2007. And yeah, you are correct, man. Coming off of Kennedy and Heidi, following it up with The Second Coming. Yeah, quite a 1-2 punch. And there's still two. Oh my God, there's only 2 episodes left after this.
I know. I know. I'm going to have to start changing my intro to like, I'm Jakob Burrows, and I've seen, well, we'll see. We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll see.
Holy shit. Yeah. I thought AJ might die. So that's where we are at. Like, and I was more upset about him than Chris. Make of that what you will.
Yeah. I know. I could see it. I mean, it's going back to like an interview I read with David Chase, because like they asked him a question about it. I know we'll get more into the actual beats of the episode, but I mean it's hard not to just jump right into this here. Haha, literally. But
God.
They asked him about how he puts the bag over his head, and I guess some people have said that kind of looks like the Abu Ghraib torture photos that was going on like at the time. Remember with Bush, and then Americans were torturing prisoners of war or whatever, and there's like a fake picture, and then he's like, nah, that's no, we weren't trying to do anything like that. The thing is, I kind of get someone's rationale with that, because they are like, AJ's getting into war and how the world is, and it's affecting him and piling on with his depression. I guess I kind of understand it, but he does mention that was someone's real story. Like, I don't know if it was a friend of the writer or it actually happened to one of the writers, but I guess it just came up in the room that someone had known someone whose son did that exact thing. And he's like, I just thought it was so funny that not only did they try to drown themselves, they put a bag over their head. It's like, yeah, you know what? You're right. You're right, David.
It's a bit superfluous. It's not really necessary, the old bag, is it?
Yeah.
Doesn't help. Or maybe it does. I don't know. Does that have air in there? I don't know. It was rough. It was a rough viewing for me, for old Jakob Burrows over here, to be honest. Because AJ, we've talked about it before. Why do people hate AJ? He just wants to chase that fly, man. Other people are chasing the dragon. He's just chasing the fly. And, like, he's just living his life. And, yeah, he's kind of an idiot and stuff. But, like, Chris killed people, and the worst AJ ever did was like smoke marijuana at his communion and burn some guy's toes with acid. Like, we've all done those 2 things, right, Jim?
Yes, absolutely. And wow, I love that you brought up him chasing the fly, because wow, what a journey it's been, huh? Yeah. Going back to season 1, where it seemed like there was at least 2 or 3 scenes where it would cut to him in his room with a shoe trying to kill a fly. And I think someone got annoyed that we were bringing that up in one of our reviews, but sorry, it was definitely a character trait. But now how far we've come, where poor young AJ tries to drown himself in the very pool that Tony was raising a family of ducks, represented so much.
Yeah, I thought that shot when he's looking out at the pool, I thought it was like, oh man, another great reference to the ducks. It's just, man, the pool's all covered up now. What a deep shot. And then it's like, oh no, AJ's going to kill himself. Great. But we do start with, like, we mentioned last week that, they're dumping the asbestos. There's ducks. You can hear ducks in the background. And we start with a shot of the asbestos in this episode. It's the very first thing. Just a bunch of trash on, like, by a lake or whatever. And then we cut to Tony waking up. And I swear, it's been a lot of Tony waking up this season. I guess we're trying to close the circle because we had a lot of that at the start. It's sort of a staple, but there's a lot of it now. We start with him waking up and then cut to AJ waking up and putting on his music because it's the only thing that makes him feel alive, I guess.
Yeah, and that what wakes up Tony or something,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and then Tony, I like I've said, I'm a big fan of Tony in his robe coming downstairs when he wakes up. So I welcome the more we only have a few episodes left. The more chances we have of Tony waking up, coming down in his robe, I'll accept it. And what a watch came from Vegas for Carmilla, because it's like we're totally back in, even though we've come so far from season 1, we're totally back in Carmen Tony mode of earlier seasons, where even though we've gone through this journey of them splitting up and then having a business relationship and then kind of getting back together. Well, I mean, they are back together, but now we're back in the mode of Tony goes and cheats and then gives her a nice, flashy present and everything's good.
Yeah, and if I could tell a personal anecdote, in work, someone had flowers delivered by their boyfriend, flowers to the office.
Yeah.
And they were, which, they were rightly getting picked on for this because it's hilarious. And so we're all picking on this person, that's our bad maybe. And then, I don't know, she started saying things along the lines of like, oh, you should bring flowers home to your girlfriend, to everyone here and there and everything. And I don't know, the particulars are not important, but she was being quite annoying, and she said that to a load of people, and including me. And I was like, "Oh no, sorry. Men only buy flowers for women when they're cheating on them."
So yeah,
which is something I've learned from The Sopranos, among other sources.
Yeah, go ahead and plant that seed for that poor girl.
Oh yeah, it's a long. I mean, not to get into real shit, but it's a long distance relationship too. So.
Yeah.
So that's just a great thing to hear from your coworker. I'm sorry. She was being quite annoying, to be fair. But I just thought of that here when Tony goes to Vegas practically to fuck someone. There were the peyote was pivotal as well, but it sent express from Las Vegas this nice engraved watch, and he clearly bought it while he was still there, probably still just coming off that peyote on the way to the airport or whatever, and he's like, oh shit, I cheated again. I need to buy something to let Carmilla know that I cheated, because that's basically what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then we got more asbestos. That's from this episode, where they're handling it. Bobby rolls up and they're like, oh, aren't those guys supposed to wear space suits or whatever they call them? And of course they're not, because they're immigrants that are being taken advantage of, and they don't have to pay union dues or whatever. Bobby won't shake the guy's hand, which is hilarious. He's also concerned that the money's not in an envelope.
And he says later he didn't have an envelope, just handing it over. Good stuff.
And yeah, so quick check in on that. And yeah, AJ's in therapy again, and now talking about Palestine and the beating of the African man, and Blanca, of course, comes up. So
yes,
he's kind of back into his spiral mode.
Yeah, and okay, so this scene, how dark does it get in this one? Because it's not like he's depressed, but he's at least communicative and he's talking about what he's feeling. So he's not that deep in the hole at this very moment, at this point in therapy. He's, they're trying to unpack why he's this thing with the African kid stuck with him and all of that. And, the guy asked if he tried to stop it, and he's like, I'm one individual, what can I do? And talks about how it's sad that he's not feeling positive from the drugs when he knows other kids are feeling positive from the drugs, and talks about how the class is interesting, but it's depressing to learn about all this stuff that I guess he is transitioning. He was a happy wanderer, unaware of the goings on of the world, and as he learns more of the world, he it coincides with him getting more and more depressed.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that double-edged sword, because the idea was okay, let's cheer him up. Maybe if he goes back into school and then makes friends, that'll help. But it's just kind of piling on. It's obviously not a fix. I mean, I'm sure, even if he wasn't going to class or whatever and learning about the world, it would be something else, because he just does have this depression and that he needs help with. But the fix thing initially works, but now it's just adding into all this negativity in his life. And yeah, so things, as we know where things are headed, it's starting to pile up.
So the therapist suggests like writing his feelings down in some way, which I think is probably a good suggestion, but it doesn't he doesn't do that. How do you feel about the therapist? Because in the first scene, as you pointed out, it's kind of like almost a parody of how a bad therapist would handle it. How do you
Yep.
feel about him having seen a few therapy sessions? Is he okay? Is he terrible? What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely not like the first scene almost does seem like it's just going to be a comical, like, therapy, right? And then you never, like, you'd almost expect to never see that guy again.
Yeah.
But, here we are, what, like 2 episodes later, and we're checking in with him each time. I mean, I wouldn't say he's bad. I mean, there's nothing to really show that he's great, but he's doing a Melfi thing, kind of. He asks short questions, leaves some silences, trying to let him speak, makes some suggestions, but maybe it's just not too late, but the people don't understand how extreme things are getting for poor AJ.
Yeah, and I think AJ's just it ends, I think, with him just expressing his general disgust with the world because they're showing on the news all these people who can't afford food, and then they're showing all these fat people in the mall, and then he's like, you should see our house. So he's like, I'm one of the fat people, even if I am not fat. Like I'm more part of the problem than part of any type of solution. And and the therapist brings up maybe his connection to Blanca and the beating of this kid and or the boy, and yeah, I don't know. It just ends with him going, she's not black. I mean, she's pretty tan.
Yeah.
Feels like he's not quite grasping what they're getting at, but
yeah. It's they always I like that because they keep it AJ, and it's actually it's kind of very similar to Tony later on of how like you almost get it and then poof, like it gets away, like you almost have that thought or like that you're so close, but then I don't know, I guess you get in your own way type of deal. Then we have the boys, chilling with the boys at the back of Satrielli's, I believe.
Coming on home, and he says there he was there to collect money from Christopher, and Carmilla mentions that earlier. Like, I understood why he had to go to Vegas when you mentioned about Christopher's business interest. I read this as a complete lie. Or do you think there's any truth to it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know if he collected money. I guess the business interests are his escort.
Yeah, that's probably it. I mean, that's what I mean as well. Like and he even brings up like doing drugs, and he's all like, he's had this spiritual experience, and he tries to kind of relate some of it, but then just goes, kind of shakes his head and has some wine because he can't quite communicate it. He says like, he tries to describe this moment, which the show shows us really well, of the flashing light and what it means, because we know what he saw in the coma and all this stuff. But when he tries to put words to it, he's just like, and then the sun came up, and he's just quiet, and Sill's like, oh yeah? Like, oh, cool. Great story.
And then and then Paulie talks about how someone like slipped acid on in something of his or something like that.
Yes, and laser beams were shooting from Junior's eyes.
Yeah.
We all got stories, bro. Like, Tony, you're not special. We all been slipped acid.
Yeah, one of them I think mentions taking ecstasy. Like it's very similar. Tony always has these moments where I guess he almost has it. Like he almost has this moment where he can relate to everyone. And I guess that's the running gag where people try to relate to AJ committing suicide, and then someone has to specify like, oh, so you mean like your kid tried to commit suicide? Oh, no, he gets the blues.
Exactly. It's very similar to this scene, which I think is intentional, when they're like, oh yeah, I did X, I did this, I did that, and then they're like, oh yeah, my kid, gets sad sometimes or whatever.
And they there is a nice picture of Christopher on the wall, him in his director's chair or whatever, a nice little tribute. And again, so then when we get to this next scene when they're having dinner, like this is kind of similar to what I was talking about in the last episode. Like Tony again is still like wants to fuck Kelly because she talks about how the house is big and it's like scary or whatever, and he's like, hey, you just call, I'll be over there in 2 minutes. And it's like, all right, guy, come on. Jesus, you already screwed a girl in Vegas.
Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't pick up on that, but you saying it, I can see it. I can see it's there, because I mean, he always wants to fuck everyone who's attractive, and she's attractive, and more importantly, she's Chris's ex, and like I said, he's he wants to basically. just the same way that AJ's regressing into watching cartoons sometimes, he wants to mentally regress and be, Happy Wanderer Chris and fuck his girlfriends and wives and everything. So, Tony gets what he wants.
And then AJ comes down and he starts, oh, how can you eat that meat? They spray viruses on it to kill the rats.
AJ's so woke.
Yeah, totally. It totally is. Tony is everyone. I mean, in that moment, you don't want to hear that when you're trying to enjoy your dinner. Just have a nice dinner. I understand AJ's going through something, but what does he say? He's like, oh, they wouldn't do, maybe it must be
Be a
good thing. Yeah. But of course, AJ doesn't want to hear it. And then
it's great to hear him say, fine, bury your head in the sand, because I swear at some point there's been a scene where he has his head covered by a bucket or something, right? And that is a thing that happened. He's literally done that. So
and what's he having? He's making like tea or something. Yeah, he is woke.
He's very woke. I thought it was like noodles or soup.
Oh, maybe
I don't know.
Yeah.
No idea.
I guess going into like Kelly, because it's awkward because she has to like sit there, like she's already dealing with her own shit. And I think Tony even has to bring that up. Like, why are you bringing that up when people are going through things?
Yes.
Like trying to use her as an excuse. But even just going a little meta here, it's gonna be interesting to get cast on The Sopranos, like, but it's such a weird spot for this actress who we do now know is the Wheeler mom on Stranger Things, Mike Wheeler's mom.
All right.
But like, because you're filling in for Adriana, who's like a fan favorite OG character, so people are already kind of like not going to be on your side. And then you don't get featured a ton. Like, she's definitely more of a background character. I think you even mentioned in one episode you forgot that Christopher was married.
Yeah.
So it's got to be just a weird thing of being like, oh great, I'm on The Sopranos, but then it's like, you came in at the end, much like Tony Soprano in the pilot, thinking about how he came into he missed the good old days, if you will.
It's true. She definitely doesn't get much of a chance to flex her acting chops. It would be like when she's horrified in what was called a dream, but which we established was not a dream, when she's just, literally just has the phone and screams and drops it, and then walking around being sad. Like, that's pretty much been her role since day one, is walking around being sad. And like, because we're meant to see their relationship as kind of shallow in comparison to Adriana, like, it's supposed to be she's standing in, like you said. So It's pretty tricky. It's basically like, it's a great credit for your resume, but it's not going to get people like, common people like you and me, Jim. We're not going to be talking about you. But hey, as far as like on your resume, resume though.
Yeah. Oh, magnifique. Of course.
Imagine that on your fucking show reel, though. Like, even still.
That's true. Yeah. You throw in that scene when you drop the phone, you're screaming. And then that scene when you're scared in your house because Paulie's driving over all the landscaping.
She does have some lines, so she's better off than some. But but yeah, I guess you might use this scene, even though she doesn't say much, because, she's there with Tony and Carmilla and everything. It's a real scene and everything. But yeah, I think Carmilla at this point is a kind of positive. Like, at least he's reading. Like, it's something. Can't be that bad. And it moves on to that as well. Like him, I think he's paying more attention in class now than like last episode when he was in class.
Yeah, it gives more depth to those cutaways in the previous episode, like where we just do see him in class, like intercut with Tony in Vegas, because it's like, all right, we get it. Yeah, he's learning. But then you were mentioning like the Vegas shine in the last episode. I mean, W.B. Yeats, from what I'm reading, is an Irish poet.
This is correct.
So here we go, repping Ireland, where you do currently reside.
I got a fucking book by him right on the shelf right here, right next to me. And I've walked past his house, or one of his several houses. So there.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
Getting a bit Irish, and I always mispronounce his name. So I'm not even going to try, because it's always
I was going to say,
Yates.
I'm probably not. Yeah, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but yeah, Yates, something or other. But where the episode gets its name, the poem, The Second Coming.
Yeah, and that's the one he's reading there about like something monster slouching towards Bethlehem or whatever. Like, did you read any into this? Because it is very strange to see AJ reading poetry. We should know already in that scene that something is majorly off, right? Like this is not correct. He's reading into this and he's getting something from it. I guess it's not helping though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I was reading through the poem and like and what Ralph beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. And I mean, I don't remember this. So obviously, I have to credit Wikipedia. I guess Dr. Melfi had quoted this poem in the episode Cold Cuts. She said 2 lines: "The center cannot hold, the falcon cannot hear the falconer." So, that's season 5, episode 10. So, they love this poem. What can you say? And I mean, it's a pressing poem, just basically about how, the world could come to an end. Things are bad. One of the big lines they point out in the Sopranos session is that the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And I think it's an apt like comparison with the Sopranos of how like you're seeing some of the worst people and they are like the most intense and they're ready to be gung ho and do all their crime. Meanwhile, the best of us are just kind of happy wanderers, just people that are casualties for the most part, except for Kennedy and Heidi, if you will.
Of course. Well, we all have a Kennedy and a Heidi within us, Jim.
Yes.
So, yeah, I guess, not to get too into the poem, but it was, I guess, written to reflect the atmosphere of post-war Europe after World War I. And I'm not convinced that AJ got any of that from it. I'm kind of interested to think, like, what did AJ see in this thing, Because it would be... And I'm no poetry expert myself. I'd probably do a pretty surface reading too, but... There's a lot of depressing stuff in there, generally, I'd say. It's not like a happy poem, necessarily. It's also written at this time of the Irish War of Independence, which was going on then at the time, too. So, it's not really a positive view of the world.
Yeah. And I think it just, what it comes down to as well, it just happens to be the thing that kind of solidifies his mindset. Like, it could have been anything. It could have been... an episode of South Park or something, or I mean Borat, as is mentioned in this episode. But in this case, it happens to be the poem, "The Second Coming."
I think it's literally there to counterbalance or to argue against Carmilla, because Carmilla says, "Oh, he's reading it, can't be a bad thing," and then we see this, and we're like, "Oh, it's actually a bad thing."
Which is great, because then I love that cut. There's like a jump cut kind of in the therapy later on, the group therapy, and Carmilla goes, "How could they teach that poem to college kids?" It's like,
yes.
it's not something you say about college. Like, yeah, at that point, you're mature enough to you could take it all in. You have context now. And it's such an empty complaint of like, who will protect our college kids, But yeah, anyways, cutting back, we have Agent Harris. He's still got his microbe sickness, which, I mean, dude, if you're still dealing with this microbe, I feel like it's been quite a while, man. And maybe it's the sandwiches, maybe it's not the microbe from over in the Middle East. But the 2 Muslim guys come up yet again. What they show them like a picture, they verify, like rush out, like one of those like, oh yeah, all systems go or something.
It feels like, at this point, there's a separate show with these 2 agents, and this is just a crossover moment, It's like Buffy and Angel. It's just like, oh god, we have to go immediately, and they run out, and like there's another story going on. Because there's 2 episodes left, Jim. There's not enough space for this to have an adequate payoff, unless... against all odds, Tony is killed by an airplane crashing into him, like I mentioned last week, but it's actually a terrorist attack. Like, that's the only way this would pay off significantly, is if they actually have a part to play in the final 2 episodes, which I feel like, knowing The Sopranos, it won't. Now, I might eat those words, but right now I feel like there's no way that this is significant.
Yeah, no, and you're right. It feels like this has been a thing that's popped up forever at this point. Yeah. And it just feels like one of those things that like David Chase or Terrence Winter, whoever, Matthew Weiner, they're just like, oh, what would really fuck with people? If we kept bringing up those Muslim guys, like, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be great if people thought the Muslim guys were important? And they're like, yeah, we can get, how to get people off the Russian? Let's start bringing up these Muslim guys. Because now you forget, Jacob, because I filled you in on this long ago, but
Yep.
at this point in fandom, people were still being like, when's that Russian coming? I believe the Russian is going to show up. Now that Chris is dead and only Paulie's left, like people are still wondering about the Russian. So just remember that.
Amazing. Yeah, no, that's another one of those things where having watched last week's episode, I now view the whole series completely differently because I know what happens to Christopher. I also know that the Russian isn't coming in, but to be fair, people wouldn't have known that at the time. Like I just know that. That is just a thing I know from basic storytelling, but also I think you told me. So or it's on Wikipedia or whatever.
I think to your credit, you also weren't the type that was even too concerned with the Russian, even when we were discussing that episode. And I had to be like, well, no, you don't understand, man. People were very concerned about when this Russian was going to come back. And I mean, there was that scene like a season later where they kind of brought like Paulie and Chris brought it up in passing or in an argument. And I was like, dude, all this did was fuel the fire because everyone thought now the Russian was coming back.
This agent connection, this FBI, Jesus, this FBI agent connection, I feel like it's kind of there more to set the mood of like, again, kind of to like, even though we should hate Tony, it's like, Tony's a good guy. He doesn't want these terrorist attacks. So it's like, even though the show plainly tells us that Tony is terrible, like in this episode, it's so weird because last episode, it's pretty easy to dislike Tony. In this episode, as he's like cradling AJ, not to jump ahead and like, oh, you're all right, baby. And like, I'm just bawling. Like it is such a great moment. And then I think anyway, the FBI thing is just a small bit to say, probably them going like, this actually happened. We just happened to find out that, they'll sometimes check with the mafia guys if they have any terrorist connections because we all are against terrorists. So I think it's based on some truth. Again, I should probably look into that before saying it, but it feels like the sort of thing they might read about and go, that'd be kind of fun to put in, but not to make a major plot point.
Yeah. And it kind of keeps Agent Harris around and has shown that like, this relationship has changed a bit where like they're almost on friendly terms in a weird way. Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, from there, then we have sit down with Phil, where now they're talking about compromise and basically they're still dealing with this asbestos and where we're going to go with that. And I believe this is where he has a crack about Chris's widow. Something or like the closer. Yeah. No, go. You're right. Go ahead.
No, it was just the only bit I remembered is that Phil asks if the flowers got there, and Tony says like, "Well, if you sent them, they definitely got there." Were you thinking of something else, or?
Well, no, the crack he make, but he kind of his comment is he goes, "Yeah, I won't expect like a thank you soon. The closer someone is to you, the harder it is to grieve." So he's basically talking about his brother. Who, if we know, it's probably like right behind Tony's head here because he's overlooking where all his favorite place to be, that bar that they're hanging out at. And that's still a big sticking point between these two.
We all remember the great rant / story time for the kids when he told them about how they got them to change their names because they hate Italians and all that, and he's not going to take any of this shit anymore. And I guess this is an expression of that because when they get into brass tacks, Tony gives a counteroffer and Phil won't have any of it. And Tony tries to relate to him on a human level, bringing up before when they were in the hospital and they both were kind of like, stop and smell the roses. And that's what Christopher said as well, and Tony's trying to do it, but he's not willing to go up to 25%. So, might as well have a war over it. Fuck it.
Yeah. Like, Phil is clearly just looking for an excuse. I mean, Tony is trying to do. This is what they're supposed to do. They come in, they give a number, they talk back and forth, and then what Phil has is great lines of like, when I was in the can. I wanted manicotti. I got grilled cheese from the radiator. I think that's how he says it.
Yeah, I compromised. And then his point being, because he said before, no more compromise or whatever. So that's his thing. I felt like if Tony wanted to be a real dick, he could have gone like, when he's like, I wanted to fuck a woman, I jerked off into a tissue. Tony could have said, but he didn't. I think he held himself back. He could have said, that's not all you jerked off into.
Hell yeah. Get him.
You know, because we know how much he hates homosexuals, so that would have been a great burn. But then, you know, he gets his anger out in other ways, Tony, later, so works out.
Yeah. So things are brewing there. It doesn't work. We meet. I think this is probably where we meet Coco, because Coco is the guy who later on runs into Meadow in the city, and I think it's one of these guys that they want to pretend has always been around.
Yes.
But like clearly I don't think he has. But yeah, Coco's like sitting behind, like in kind of in the shadows behind Phil here, and he's enjoying it. Like, haha, yeah, Jersey. Because then they go to collect. Like, then they see that like Tony's getting some of his revenge. They go to collect on their no-show jobs, I assume.
Yeah.
But they're saying, no more checks. So they beat the fuck out of that guy who's just an innocent guy that's trying to run a job. Yeah.
And I think they like maybe they don't chase him down, but he's like, maybe it's your fault, to a guy who tells him to stop. And yeah, he just throws the thing after him, but it like a big measuring, like land measuring thing. It throws it after the guy, but it's nowhere close. Like they don't really they just take his money and say Tony Soprano owes you $320, and that's it. Of course, like we pointed out many times, it's just innocent bystanders who take the fall for all this. Tony has yet to this, of course, matters way less than some guy saying some shit to his daughter. So even though this guy is now in the hospital and might not walk, you never know.
So then we have AJ is on his computer, and then Meadow comes in trying to cheer him up, talking about Borat. And then I love AJ. AJ is woke because he's like, that wasn't fair to the people involved, which is, fairly true. They were being duped. They were being duped by Borat.
Yes.
And, she just tries to talk to him, and he brings up, we're going to bomb Iran, which, very apt, very now.
Ahead
of his time for sure. And she asked him, is this still about Blanca? And I love because he's like, I don't even know. I'm not sure.
That feels honest. There's other bits that aren't as honest when she, rightfully tries to motivate him and say, like, maybe you need your own place or whatever. And he says, I can't hold down a job in my condition. And then he says the most bullshit line ever of like, I can't be away from my mom's cooking. It might mess with my body chemistry or balance or whatever. And I'm like, oh, wow. Some real bullshit thrown in there as well, along with the actual honesty of saying, like, I don't even know anymore.
Yeah. Well, especially because in his previous scene, he was complaining about the steak that she made that they were eating, and he was making like you said. I think I was wrong on the tea. He was making microwave noodles, so pretty sure you can get microwave noodles in your own place. Plus, Carmela, she'd be rolling through doing his laundry, bringing him, leftover manicotti and some what was that shit she had with Richie? It was like pig innards and something or other. Who knows?
I'm sure she would. But they get into some interesting stuff as well around all this other stuff where, when she dropped out, because he's dropped out now. This is news. Like we saw him in class just like a couple of scenes ago, but now he's dropped out. And she says when she took a break as well, they busted her balls, but they didn't, like, it wasn't that big of a deal. And he thinks that she's the favorite, and she says, we're Italian and you're their firstborn son. Like, you're always going to be more important. And I don't know how he takes it.
Yeah. I think there's obviously some truth there. And there is something to be said. It ties in a little bit later on when Carm and Tony get into an argument because, he's reading Al Jazeera. There's definitely there's an element, and I guess this is also just a part of depression anyways, where he's like reinforcing it on his own. Like he's making a choice to reinforce it because he's like reading terrible things.
Yeah.
Again, it's not as easy as just like, hey, try to get out of your head for a little while. But it's kind of what you have to do. You can't be depressed and then just seek out more depression. But obviously that you can't help it sometimes.
And Tony did encourage him towards that. It did work for a little bit, but obviously we're now on the downswing here.
And then she's making Carmela's making Lincoln Log sandwiches, which looks so gross. I don't know
I've
what
never
that
seen
is.
this before, and I assume it's one of your gross American things, Jim. Like, this is on you.
Dude, I don't know what it is. Is it like mayonnaise on split hot dogs or something like that? Let
It's
me look at
something
it.
like that. And then you put more bread on top of it, and I don't know.
Tony
man.
enjoys it when he gets home later on.
Oh yeah. He's just,
Uh.
he's so busy eating it, he's barely noticing or running towards his drowning son. So they must be good.
Well, it's great because I Googled it and like, what is the Lincoln Log sandwich on foodchannel.com? And of course, it's like every time someone watches The Sopranos, we always get
Yes.
this question. I was watching The Sopranos and saw Carmela making a dish which she called Lincoln Logs. I'm curious, what are they? They looked good. No, they didn't look good.
No,
Lincoln
now,
Log.
if they were properly fried, I could imagine that it might be good, but it doesn't look good in this.
Okay, so Lincoln, they're hot dog buns or white bread in which you place hot dogs layered with cream cheese. They can be
Ugh.
warm or cold. They're also
No, they
known
can't.
they're also known as Seattle cream cheese dogs. Although the Lincoln Logs variety is said to be an East Coast version, the basic recipe appears to be slice of white bread, spread cream cheese along the length, split a cooked hot dog lengthwise, place it each half cut side down. And to get the Lincoln Log effect, you need a second hot dog that is laid over the first in the opposite direction. Yeah, no, I don't. Why? Maybe we have to try it, but I don't want to.
I guess that'll be when we're finished the whole series and we really run out of ideas. You'll get on the feed like, what does a Lincoln Log taste like anyway? Like all this bullshit. So I've Googled Lincoln Log and I don't know what it is. It's like a play thing. You build little houses, or is it about the president?
Those I know. Those, yeah, Lincoln Logs. Those are toys. That's different than the sandwich. I had those as a kid. They're just like little building blocks.
Right.
And I guess what? It's because Abe Lincoln, he grew up in a log cabin made of logs.
I said it was American, Jim. This is very American.
Yeah. Well, as a child, you're taught that Abraham Lincoln grew up in a log cabin. So, hence the Lincoln Log toys. Hence the Lincoln Log sandwiches.
AJ is so disgusted by these Lincoln Log sandwiches that he tries to kill himself.
Really?
In the next scene here. Like I said, he looks out at the covered pool, and my thought was like, oh, it's just kind of a reference to, the Earth of Tony looking out at the pool loads of times, and then it cuts and it's like, oh no, Jacob, that's not what it is at all. We're about to have a rough scene here, where, like we said, he puts a plastic bag over his head, which doesn't really do anything. But yeah, so I was like, until the car pulled up. When the car pulled up, I was like, oh, thank fucking God, because I would be so depressed if this is how it turned out. And I'm really, really glad that Tony was there to save him, even though I, kind of hate Tony and kind of love Tony. But AJ didn't deserve that. Like he didn't. So
it's really sad, and it's in the pool. It's such a weird way to do it, but also I guess kind of weirdly adds to it because he has a cinder block tied to his foot and a bag over his head. And yeah, I mean, even Tony arriving home, you can assume that, he's probably going to save him, but there's still that idea of, maybe he's just going to arrive home and find his dead son, his bloated bloated corpse of his dead son. He does get to enjoy a taste of Lincoln Log. And then he looks out. I love the way it's played, because at first you'd be like, what are you doing? Why are you fucking around in the pool? Because obviously it's not going to be apparent what's going on, because it's AJ, because he's even he's just kind of walking at first. What the fuck are you doing? You're fucking up the pool or whatever.
Yeah, because from our perspective, we're like, run, fucking run. And even when he hears it, he's like, what the fuck are you doing? Walking out. And then eventually when he runs, you're like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. Runs, dives in. And he doesn't realize immediately what's going on. Hey, let's go. Get out of the pool. And he's like, my foot's stuck. And then he has to realize everything has to slowly come to realization what's happening here. And I mean, they talk about, again, going back to Sopranos sessions, they talk about how he has his machismo at first, where he's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? But I feel like that's such a natural, just in the moment reaction. Cause again, he's just still processing everything that's going on. Yeah. And then there's that realization of oh no, this is suicide. This is the culmination of all this depression and anxiety in my son, and it does turn into that tender moment where he's cradling him. And going back to the AJ character, and also the Robert Iller, the actor that plays him, he was just a kid, cast as Tony's son. But when it comes time to some of these moments where he needs to act, I think like he nails them.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
not to say that he's like an amazing actor, and I understand why he's maybe not in other projects right now, but like at least when they give him the opportunities, I don't feel like he's ever let them down.
Yeah, there's been a few really great moments like that, especially lately. And like I don't know why, but I always try to go like, oh yeah, he's really well directed there, like
Yeah.
which is kind of a dick move, because he does do the acting himself. But we've always said that they know how to play AJ or know what to do with AJ that like works for him and his acting. And yeah, this really works. And it's heartbreaking. And of course, Tony is there. Gandolfini's pulling his fair share. I agree as well. I don't think it's like necessarily machismo of like going like the fuck you do, and like he doesn't have like a persona on. It's his natural reaction. But as he sort of sees the complete and total breakdown that AJ's having, he gets stripped away.
Yeah. And then we have him at the hospital, and they're bringing him, and he's all like, I assume maybe doped up or something. He's all pale, and
they say that he's had a lot of Valium. So.
Oh, they do. Yeah, that's right. You're right. Yeah, they do, and they kind of have to take him to the, I guess, suicide ward, wherever they're keeping him. And Carmelo's rightfully upset. What does she say? Like, he was always so happy, which I mean, maybe not completely true, but in these moments, it seems that way. And then
says that Meadow warned them, which she did, and all. Yeah.
And
happy, happy little boy.
And where the machismo has to kick in is when then Tony's with his boys. Back when he's with the boys, we've seen, fairly recently when he was already like jealous of like Patsy and Carlo talking about their sons and how they were burning toes off and collecting money at college and
doing cool shit.
Wanting to break their dick off in the stripper's ass. I guess very similar going back to like the Bevilacqua kid and his friend in a weird way. Yeah. He has to kind of come in, and he even just outright says, all right, like, let's get the 800-pound elephant out there. My kid tried to off himself, and I don't think anyone thinks lesser of him, but I guess he is an alpha male, and he has to kind of put up more of a front. And I don't know.
They all try to like explain why it's not Tony's fault and it's not AJ's fault, and it's like, oh, these chemicals, like in the opening clip or whatever, all these like Paulie has the worst explanation, but they're all trying to sort of make it not a loss of face for anyone involved, which is nice, I guess, but it's pretty rough as well, because it's not something you can't go out and shoot someone. Who are you going to shoot, AJ? You can't solve this with violence. You just have to do talking about your emotions, which these guys are famously not the best at. Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm trying to see, where does it go from here? We got the big fight with Carmela,
which I kind of felt like Carmela was being mean here, but I guess it's not to say that what she's saying, like some of the stuff she's saying is truth. Like, it's got to be hard to always I guess someone being depressed is hard on you, and it is weirdly selfish to point out, but she, like she says, how hard it is for someone constantly complaining. But it's more so, I feel like, when she's like, he didn't come from my side of the family. That's all I'm going to say. And especially because we know Tony already feels like he has this putrid soprano gene that is passed down to his son.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Like, we're obviously more on Tony's side in this fight for once, like, as opposed to the previous big fight about the house or whatever, when he wants the money to gamble it away and all of that. In this fight, but Carmela's, I I know Carmilla's love of AJ has always been more unconditional than Tony's, or maybe that's not true. I'm not sure, but like it's her happy little boy, like, and it's come in her mind. It's like, well, we gotta pin the blame on someone, so she's doing the opposite of what the guys are doing in the back room at Satrielli's, where she just wants a solution to it, something to blame and point at and go, well, if Tony stops his bullshit, then AJ is going to be fine too. Rather than thinking that it's something that AJ, has to deal with on his own. It's like, if we can pin this, where's the reason for this? Well, it's Tony, because Tony's always doing the same bullshit, and it is really rough to hear, I imagine, as well, for Tony. Like you said, he already thinks that himself, but not great to hear it back at you in this moment.
And we also get,
oh, poor you.
Oh, poor you. It's wonderful. And when she says, like, can you imagine what it's like being with someone who complains all the time? Like, you saw in his eyes him thinking of Livia, right? Because that's what I saw.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, well, there's another one later. I guess I'll save it. We'll save it for later.
Okay.
You know what? No, we won't. Later on, there's also,
oh, poor you.
and if we go back, I mean, let's just take an opportunity to look back.
Let's do it.
Oh, poor you.
Oh, poor you.
Oh, poor you.
Poor you.
Of course,
Oh,
AJ got one.
Oh, sorry, here's one more.
Oh, poor her.
So there
Very
you go.
good. Yeah, I forgot that AJ got one in there as
Yeah,
well.
AJ fitted one in there.
Very good. Now, I that would be like the catchphrase of this show. It's not very gangstery, but if it was an honest trailer, it would just be The Sopranos. Ah, poor you. Like,
Yeah,
that's what
absolutely.
it's about.
But yeah, they're both, what she brings up, you were the happy-go-lucky guy in high school, and that was all bullshit, which it's not fully fair, because that's like everyone, when you're at a party or hanging out and you're social, of course people are a certain way, and then when you're with someone and you're with someone in their, not just their good times, but their bad times, there's going to be, different sides of people. But yeah, it all culminates into what she throws the watch at him, and then he fucking just whips the watch, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, they throw it at each other. So that's how long that goodwill from that gift lasted.
Yeah.
She's hip to the game anyway. Like, doesn't really matter, these gifts, and yeah, it just becomes a projectile. So we get a therapy scene with Melfi. I don't really remember what the main thing in this scene is.
Well, pointing out the effortless comedy, I got such a big laugh when she goes, "It could have been a cry for help," and then he goes, "Weren't you listening?" He was yelling. He was screaming for help.
It's literally crying for help.
Yeah, he's like, "We're gonna listen to my story." He was screaming for help the whole time, and
yeah,
so great.
That is good. And as she points out, it's also quite funny when she says, like, he may have known that the rope was too long to keep him submerged, and he's like, yeah, or it could just be a fucking idiot.
Yeah, and
both of which are potentially true.
And then we kind of see the flip side here, because Tony does start to blame Carmilla. So I don't know if it's what he would say initially, or if it's more of a reaction to the argument they've had in the previous scene. But he does start talking about how Carmilla always coddled him. And then Melfi asks, "Are you ashamed of him?" And then he says, "It's a coward's way out." And it does kind of end on, that's something that someone would say that doesn't understand depression, which you do. And it doesn't believe what, so Tony does understand it's not that. And that's kind of where we leave it at. And then we have Carmilla with AJ at the facility, or wherever he's being kept now. Tony's not there. I don't know, there's some story. I mean, I couldn't tell if it's a real story of like Meadow rear-ended or something happened and Tony had to go help her. Like, that's what they say. I couldn't tell if they're trying to say maybe it's because of the fight, or maybe Tony can't see him in this state, or whatever. They don't leave much there. But I think she mentioned something about bringing in food, and he's like, I don't think that's allowed because of all the bulimic girls that are here.
That's right.
She looks like a girl pulling her own hair out.
Yeah, real healthy environment, but at least he has group. I'm not sure if it was true either about the car, because it might just be that Tony's in his own therapy, and maybe Carmela doesn't want to say he couldn't come right now because he is also in therapy because he gave you the putrid fucking soprano genes. Maybe she doesn't want to get into all of that.
Yeah.
So she just makes this thing up. It could be, or it could be true.
Yes.
I don't think it's true, because later we see Meadow like fairly. Like, the next scene is with Meadow. She doesn't look like she's been rear-ended on Bloomfield Avenue, so, you know.
Yeah. And yeah, that's when Coco shows up, right?
Yeah, Coco shows up and talks some cool shit. She has to repeat it all later, but yeah, it's kind of amazing that she hasn't run into any of this, you know? It's been like she's 20-something at this point.
And I guess it just kind of shows, like, obviously, if Phil wasn't being a bit more brazen with the Soprano family or the New Jersey crew, something like this wouldn't happen. But it just shows how the leadership sets the tone, and now it's like, oh, fuck them, like, you know, they're nothing. We can do whatever we want. And plus, it's amped up a little bit because he also is annoyed he didn't get his paycheck or whatever. But it's pretty brazen. He comes up, says, "Oh, your dad," and you got a little cream on your lip. You want some more? And it's really like, like, what are you doing here? Do you understand? Do you understand the bear that you're prodding right now?
It's interesting. The guy with him is like, come on, let's go. Like, he doesn't want any of this happening in Coco. I think Meadow says, like, I could smell the drink on his breath as well. And he is, you know, swaggering/staggering a little bit on the way out. So it's clearly, like, not a great decision to do this right now. But hey, none of these mob people are making great decisions at the moment.
Yes. Yeah. And then, the next scene is she's already sitting with Carmela. So she's kind of told Carm and doesn't want it. I mean, I can't tell if it's one of those feigned, like, don't tell dad, but it's clearly like, let's tell dad. What's dad going to do?
Yeah, I think, I mean, Carmela definitely wants her to tell him, right?
Yeah, but I almost wonder, like, Meadow can't expect to tell Carmela and then Tony not hear about it. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I mean. Where it's like, is she putting up a fight? Like she doesn't want to say it because she doesn't want something to happen, or is it just like, oh no, I couldn't. Oh, actually, you know what? Here's what happened.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. She instead is more, but yeah, she kind of wants to get it off her chest. She doesn't want to carry that around, and she also reveals the mystery man that she's dating, and it's Patrick Parisi, who's, you know, Patsy's son, I guess. Has he been in this before?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I don't think so, though.
I just figured because maybe... nope, this is his first appearance. It's just because they talk about, like, he's changed a lot or whatever, and I was like, maybe he was in one of the early seasons, but no. And yeah, apparently he broke it off with his fiance. And we started talking. Weird.
Yeah, what a salacious affair that's been going on that we didn't even know. We didn't even know was happening. Yeah. But you know, it is almost like royalty. The families joining together, and it's interesting because it's like such classic Meadow fashion. Like, you kind of assume, since we haven't seen Meadow a lot or been like involved in her life too much since Finn's been gone, that maybe like things are different and she's more mature. But she mentions how, like, she's not doing med school, she's doing law, but then she has like a offhand line that kind of assumes that, like, it's because Patrick's doing law or kind of recommended it type deal.
Yes, although she was like interning at a place doing law stuff too, trying to decide that from way before. But yeah, it is totally, I don't know, maybe she'll do better in law. I don't know. It's better for the family, La Familia, as well, to have a lawyer on board. But yeah. Again, 2 episodes left. Like, you can change your mind every episode, Meadow. It doesn't really matter at this point. I'm sorry. Yeah. You're gonna change it next season too, if there was a next season, and there isn't. So we'll just imagine that.
And the way Tony plays, it's great though, where he's just kind of like, even when she's talking, he's kind of staring off in the distance. You know, he's just thinking about Coco and how, because first he's like, don't worry, he's an idiot. But you know, it's like the wheels are spinning on what he's gonna do once he runs into Coco for what happened here.
Yep. So let's see. Melfi goes and sees her therapist. What's his name again?
Oh, Elliot.
That's right. And she, like, they can't stop talking about Tony. To be fair, they're talking about other stuff too. Apparently she's seeing someone and they have a daughter, and like that's a whole thing. But we cut in at the end of that and instead get into Tony, because she mentions your favorite patient, and so they both kind of want to talk about Tony, because he, my father was a rabid Untouchables fan. Make of that what you will. But like he does this dick thing where he's like says that for sociopaths, this talk therapy, the stuff we're doing, it actually has been studied, and it means that, for them, it's actually them just sharpening their sociopathic skills. It has nothing to, like, it never produces anything positive. And she's like, why are you smirking?
Yeah. And I love that they give him this, I don't know why it's douchey, but his water bottle. Yeah. It's so douchey.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a water bottle, but I guess it's because it's like in this, nylon mesh carrier, and it's like kind of really big. I mean, he's doing good things for the environment. He's not using single-use plastic. This is great stuff, but also the way he keeps like sipping on it with his his smirk. It's such a perfect little detail, and it is weird. I mean, I guess it's just because obviously they need to get her to talk about Tony to have this come up, but it feels very like regressive for Melfi, the way she's like, yeah, like as your favorite patient would say, maybe I should put my foot up her ass or whatever.
Yeah.
Because again, we haven't really seen much of her, especially her personal life, like we used to. So it feels almost like out of nowhere. But yeah, I think the douchey thing also, where he brings up the article and how this years of work you've been doing actually has been a very bad thing.
Yeah.
It is reminiscent, I guess, of going back to the previous episode with his dream and how he speaks one way and then he gets to craft that and speak a different way when he actually talks to her.
Yeah.
Does kind of show it a little bit in action.
And given the violence that follows, could be some truth to the whole thing. But it is great, the water bottle, because the first time he sips it, it's kind of like emphasized, like it's like, oh, that's a big bottle. But then the end of the scene is literally just him saying is like, the conviction rates were higher for vendors in therapy than people not receiving treatment at all. And it cuts to her, and it cuts to back to him, and he's just drinking like a big gulp, staring her down. So it's so comedic. That's sometimes my favorite punchline as well, in a thing where you just don't get the reaction shot you want, is just silence and someone like slurping their tea or whatever. So that's basically what they're doing. And I love it.
Yeah. Then we have Tony showing up, starts pistol whipping Coco, beating the shit out of him, points a gun at Butchie, and then he, puts a gun in his mouth, and then he makes him fucking put his teeth on the curb, and he fucking curb stomps him, which is insane. And, Butchie's like, you're making a big mistake here, but also, hey, I mean, it was his daughter. I thought he killed him there, because the only time I've seen this in media, really, I think, is American History X. I can't imagine surviving that either. Yeah.
Yeah. And teeth just fly everywhere, and, beating him up's fair enough. But the Weasley guy we've talked about before, it feels like he's correct in saying that he's making a big mistake there, because he can beat him up, and no one will, I don't think anyone would go you get to take revenge on Tony Soprano. But if you kill him, or in this case, brutally maim him, shoot all his teeth out of his mouth, that's probably a mistake. And I love that the waiters or whatever just get him up.
Now, I mean, but I guess they make a comment when Carmine shows up later that he's not dead?
They do. He's supposedly alive. So
yeah, so bizarre. I couldn't imagine someone living through that.
Yeah,
but I guess.
And I was just gonna say, hilariously, has a tooth in his.
Trousers. That's almost too much. That's I still love it.
Yeah,
it's almost like, I mean, I guess we used to talk all the time about sitcom-y. I mean, I guess obviously in a more morbid sitcom, but yeah, the fact that in the middle of this group therapy, he's looks down in his pant leg and there's a tooth in there, and he has to kind of try to hide it. Meanwhile, AJ's going off on talking about the past, which it's at first it seems almost like, I don't want to say like fully legit, but like makes sense. But then when he's like, you made me wear that raincoat in second grade and I got beat up for it. And I'm kind of with Tony almost like, oh Jesus, like now you're just kind of he's in excuse mode like he was with Meadow.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. It's interesting how the scene is put together. I think it like cuts basically, like it cuts forward a few times where after the two thing where it's like cuts to them being silent and then cuts to them talking in the middle of one conversation and then cuts to them being silent, and it's kind of like this thing of Melfi and every therapy scene we've seen where they leave a silence to be filled. The one significant part feels like when this thing that we saw where Olivia said, that it's all a big nothing and you die on your own or whatever, and that was said to AJ. I don't remember when, but he was obviously quite young, and it stayed with him, and he's talked about it with his therapist, and I don't know, it's a great unifying moment there, because Tony's dealt with Olivia's line staying in his head for years and years, so he definitely can relate to that, even if he can't relate to the dorky raincoat.
Yeah, because that definitely feels like, obviously there's some substance there, and he was pretty young and impressionable at the time. I think that's one of the clips we used to open when we discussed that episode. It does feel like something that would stick with you, especially when you're getting the blues, as Carlos would say. It's all a big nothing life, and you die in your own arms.
Yep.
And then there's that cut of like, what kind of poem is that to teach to college students, which I love. And so he's dealing with that. Then we cut to Patsy, who's all, he's very happy that Meadow and his son are together. Tony's reactions and the faces he's making about it are so great because he's clearly not as excited.
Well, to me, Patsy will always be that guy who they kept on because they liked him even after they killed his character, and they were like, he has a twin. Like, that's what I think of every time he's on screen. So, I think he has a similar level of significance in Tony's life, and to go now, we're going to be like, what?
Grandparents.
Grandparents.
We're not too young to be grandparents. And I mean, he's also, because of that, because they killed his twin brother, and they had to like keep the actor on. He is the guy that almost killed Tony when the FBI were like setting up their sting, like setting up the lamp. He showed up with a gun, and then he decided to just piss in his pool instead.
That's right. So you want to be grandparents for that guy? So little Carmine shows up, and they have a little talk about, and he also has some platitudes about his daughter, and Tony's like, but she went through some serious stuff though, and he's like, no, she's fine. But anyway, so they say, he's there to broker a deal. That's what he does. He's the brokerer at this point, and he's gonna smooth things over, and they have to go and apologize. And I already can tell that that's not gonna work out great. Tony's really upset still.
Yeah. And then we check back in with Melfi again, and like I almost wanted to use some clips from here, but I think it's always stayed with me. I think one time way back when you mentioned something about using therapy clips because it's so easy, so that's why I'm always like, use another therapy clip. But
I don't remember saying that, but okay. This is the kind of thing. I'm Livia, just saying stuff, and I don't know it stays with you.
Yeah, it's stuck with me. But because this is where he kind of gets more into Vegas and peyote here, and he talks about that, he believes there's an afterlife. There's something else. And what does she say? She says something like it's silent, and then she says alternate dimensions, and he's like, what are you gonna be funny now? Or something like that. And I don't think she's making a joke. I think she's just trying to kind of go with his idea.
Yeah.
But then he has our mothers are the bus drivers. Nay, they're the bus. And they bring us to our destination, and they move on, and we spend time trying to get back on the bus. She makes a comment like that's like astute or something like that. And he's like, don't be so surprised.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good scene. It's showing that Tony does have like like I think he has, to go against what Elliot said, he has learned a lot about, from therapy. He's learned a lot about himself and about the way he reacts. I guess to Elliot's credit, maybe he's not using that for good, but he's clearly a different person than he was in season 1.
Yeah, I think the bus thing is basically, I'm sure there's been jokes in this show about it as well, but it's like saying that Freudian psychology or whatever is all about wanting to fuck your mother, and that's not quite it, I guess. But like that's the easy joke to make. But then this is his reinterpretation of that, the essence of that psychological understanding of like even though your mother's brought you into this world, they're very important. They're still like more I just got distracted because I swear it's so cold in my room that I'm breathing and the air is getting like what's the word? It's steaming from my breath.
You're getting
so,
the all right.
Yeah, so that's cool.
That's like James Gandolfini visiting you right now.
Yeah, pretty weird. Sorry about that. Anyway, point was that's his way of describing the main thesis of Freudian psychology, of saying that, we're all obsessed with what happens in the first few years of our life as, our parents mold us, and him saying we're all trying to get back on the bus could be read as like trying to get back inside your mother. So that's the bit where he's found other ways of describing what Freudian psychology describes in a way that's very difficult to put into the right words, if that makes sense.
No, I think that makes complete sense. And that's where it kind of goes into, like, it is like he's there and he's trying to like put it into words and he's trying to explain it. And that's why he says, like, you have these thoughts and you almost get it. And like hearing him say that, like, I can relate to that so much, because you feel like you have like these epiphanies, or sometimes you feel like you've had an epiphany in the past and then now you can't remember it. Like that type of thing. And it's like, it feels like you're so close and then it's just out of grasp. And I mean, especially tying it into him seeing the light, and then what he does or doesn't remember from his, coma visions or dreams or afterlife, wherever you want to connect that, and how he's connecting it to, there being something more once you go or once you die.
Yeah. So there's just a couple of short scenes left where Tony shows up to apologize with the little Carmine, and they get turned away at the door, even though it's all brokered and settled and it's decided. Do you think Phil just changed his mind?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's like, or was this always this weird power move? Like this is the plan. But then again, he kind of looks pathetic because he's yelling out the window at like they're walking away. That's right, cocksucker. So
I thought it was. I thought, because it is the last few episodes, I thought like, right, this is when the bullets start flying. They just lured them over there. But no, I guess it would be pretty stupid to do on your home turf. But there you go.
Yeah, because it's my first instinct is to think that it's this weird alpha move, make him show up and then deny him, but then it doesn't come off that way because he's yelling out the window. So it could also be that, I mean, from what obviously we don't know Phil as intimately as we know Tony, but we do know that Phil did at least have that real moment that Tony brought up when they were in the hospital. But he's grasping with the same thing Tony was, where it's like you think you're going to stop and smell the roses, and then life beats you down, or the ordinary day-to-day just distract you from that. And then maybe, I'm sure Butchie, that ghoul, isn't helping either when he's like, oh, I'm sure he's in his ear saying like, you're going to make a deal with this guy now. So yeah, a number of factors probably come into play.
Right. So finally, the most important scene, where AJ watches TV and fucking Lincoln is on there. So the Lincoln logs make sense. And there's a through line to the whole thing.
Oh, that's great. I didn't even pick that up. Lincoln's
I know.
It's a commercial for like antidepressants or something, isn't it?
I guess. I was trying to figure out what it was, but they're just talking about insomnia and there's an author there saying that like more than half of adults experience insomnia at least a few nights a week. So I guess it's an ad for some sleep help or something.
Yeah, I guess not necessarily antidepressant, but it is medication. But yeah,
Mm.
Lincoln Logs, Lincoln drowning, the sandwiches that pushed him over the edge. I love that Tony shows up with a pizza because I feel like
Because he wasn't there.
But also we've seen this many times. I mean, I think when he yelled about AJ being his heir or whatever, remember that time when he was like, I'm supposed to, when he didn't want to get a vasectomy, and he's like, I'm supposed to get a vasectomy, and this is my heir, because after like AJ dropped like a dish or something stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he showed up in his room with a pizza.
Yes.
Of course, there's that classic time he showed up in the pizza and then he got kicked out of the house and he came back and took the pizza.
Yeah, that's right. Of course.
And plus, obviously, Sopranos and food, that's always a thing. Like, I'm going to make you feel better. Let's have some food. But of course, if he had been there earlier, he would have known that you can't bring food into the place. So he doesn't even have that like safety net. And we get that lingering end shot where he walks in and kind of takes AJ over under his arm, and they walk off together. So great stuff.
It's a really good episode, and I'm glad AJ didn't die. I don't think he'll die in the next 2 episodes, but like I wouldn't put it past him. He's pretty clumsy, even if it's not intentional. Of course I guess I should have known, because AJ, the way this show is written, he never succeeds at anything. So if he tries to kill himself, he's going to be fine. But if he tries to do something mediocre like hang a shelf, he's probably going to die. So I hope they don't do that in the last couple episodes, because this episode made me realize I actually kind of like AJ. I don't want him to die.
Yeah, that would be classic Sopranos fashion of like, he's putting up a shelf and then, falls on his drum set that it was returned by the guy that he sold it to or whatever. But I'm with you. I think we've always, I feel like we're a little bit different from at least the louder Sopranos crowd I read online, who very much hate AJ, which I still do get to a point, but I think this show, we've always been a champion for good old Anthony Jr.
Agreed. And we'll continue doing so for 2 whole episodes. Now, if you want to share your thoughts on this episode or either of the upcoming episodes, I hear they're quite important. You can email us at showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com, or of course leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, though the Apple Podcast ones are the ones that we actually see and we'll read out if you send one in. Would really appreciate one if you haven't already. Or again, just email us at showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com. Share your thoughts on the end of the series as we get there very slowly. And thank you again for coming along with us. I feel like I have to say it every episode.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And 2 to go. Very bittersweet, very exciting, but also, like it feels like a piece of my soul. Piece of my soul is going to go away, but then we just have to rewatch it again.
The Sopranos is like a bus, right?
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
So everything Jacob said, please send in your feedback. Please rate and review the show. Please tell a friend. And I don't know, is there anything else?
Just 2 things. First, you can go to showswhatyouknow.com for all of our other coverage, say Real History, where me and 2 Irish fellows, as we've talked about lately, I am in Ireland, we talk about history and historical films and how they relate to the real history that was going on at the times. We also have Blank Meets Blank, where Jim and I make up new television shows, just randomly brainstorming stuff from 2 hat drawings. It is very good. They're both available on Spotify as well as your podcatcher of choice, most likely. And we have coverage of general TV shows as well, like any of your favorite shows. There might be an episode on at showswhatyouknow.com. And then there's just one more thing, Jim.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Cut to black.
And